Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thursday morning Bible study. First, I want to thank Dee for covering for the last couple of weeks. Thank you, Dee. Always a big help. Everybody agree? Good, good.
Yes, she did a wonderful job.
Any burning questions from, what did you do, 6 and 7, Commandment 6 and 7, that we need to cover before we go to 8? Going once, twice. All right. So let us then begin with the eighth commandment. We're making great progress. We'll have 3 more weeks. We have 8, 9, and 10, and then the section on grace, and that will complete our ordinary Thursday Bible study, and then we will begin our chronological Bible study. So, would somebody like to read the eighth commandment? Nobody wants to read the commandment?
I can't seem to make my
I'll
screen
read
big
it.
enough to see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The eighth,
Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
the eighth commandment. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It was said to the men of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn.
All right.
I don't know what happened to me. I jumped out when you said let's start the recording.
You cut everybody off and everybody didn't turn themselves back on because
I
I
didn't cut
couldn't.
anybody off.
I didn't cut through. I wasn't able to come through either.
All right. Well, are we all on now?
Yeah, you got
Yes.
me
Okay.
host again.
Yes.
All right. So, the eighth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. Um, as a general matter, this commandment, as you could see, the Catechism says it's one of these fundamental commandments on which so many other things about society and our relationship is based. That truth telling is essential to our ability to live together and to worship God. Do you believe that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
yeah, we're not doing that right now, but I got it. I get it.
Not telling the truth right now?
Have you listened to TV lately?
No, you say we're not doing that right now. So
Right.
No, have you listened to TV lately?
yeah, no, but I meant right now in Bible study. I think we're doing
Oh,
fine.
oh, we're doing just fine.
Well, you can only speak for yourself.
We're doing just fine.
So, what do you think about that idea of truth telling being at the heart of societal, social, and even faith relationships?
The
It's a
truth.
critical foundation for everything else to be built on.
Mm-hmm.
And why?
It is nothing can stand without the truth being the foundation.
Yeah, you can't I don't know. I mean, what people know about you has to be I don't know how I want to say this. I mean, what I think of Father Rich has to be the truth. Everything I know about him is a lie. And that doesn't set well with me or you if everything I know about you is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
D, I kind of know what you're talking about. Yeah. Because D, when you said we're not doing that, I understood exactly what you meant. I think in Bible study and in church, and we're trying our best to be truthful about what we do, how we move, what we say. But
Right.
it seems like the world in general, and in particular, around this race. I mean, we're bombarded. They're talking about fake videos and how other countries are trying to interfere by putting up the lies. And I'm sorry, I'm calling him out. Trump is, every time he opens his mouth up, it's a lie. And people are confused and they're not walking in the truth. And I think that bothers me more than him just telling the lies, is that people are believing these lies.
Yes, that's bothering.
That
Yes,
was a couple
it's
weeks
bothering me too.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's created chaos in our entire nation. I'm going to leave it there because I could go on for like ever.
Can I add something?
I wanted
to
to
that?
say a couple weeks ago when we were at the Oblate event, there was a young lady sitting at the table across from me who, when Kwesi Fume walked in that room, she grabbed his hand and said, "Do you know they are closing down St. Peter Claver's church? They're shutting it down." And I had to, you know, I politely leaned over to her and told her that wasn't the case. But she insisted that that was what was happening with St. Peter Claver Church. And my sister was sitting there. Loretta, were you sitting beside her or?
Yeah, trying to calm you down. No, you okay though.
No, I was no, I was okay, but it was an untruth that she was saying. And I just could not let that go.
No, I totally agree with you. And if Kwesi wasn't familiar, he may be somewhat because I know he knows a number of the sisters, but that just creates more confusion.
Yeah.
And then maybe if because he's not Catholic, to my knowledge.
No, he's not. And his
that
response
he would maybe look at it or try to figure out something unnecessarily. What did he say?
Add something to that, please? If we think about other religions outside of Christianity, telling the truth is a principal foundation of most other faiths.
Yes.
You know, just like the honoring of the marriage, of husband and wife. Some of these principles, okay, we look at them as Christian principles, but they are really moral principles that go across the gamut of most faiths. And then when we encounter something that we've been encountering lately within our politics, it just cuts us in two. We can't believe it.
I know.
Yes. It's just.
Can I throw something in there? So my question becomes the distinction between truth as in false, true and false, truth as in the revelation of our Lord, and then truth versus transparency. And so
those are going to be things as we go through this that there are different ways of looking at the truth. I think I wanted to start with this, and obviously there's a lot of strong feelings and passion, and that's good.
We always got strong feelings and passion.
Truth is essential. We can't build relationships with loved ones if we're not speaking truth to them. We can't build relationships with society if we're not speaking the truth. And we build relationships with God if we're not telling the truth. When I worked for the Federal Communications Commission, and there would be actions against broadcasters, for violating regulations and everything. The FCC could forgive almost any wrongdoing by a broadcaster except lying to the commission. If you were caught lying to the commission, you would lose your license. And the reason for that was that, the government relies on you telling the truth so that it can regulate appropriately. And most of us, as the government as well, don't have the resources to investigate everything everyone's saying to make sure it's true. And so we have to rely on each other to tell the truth. And when others lie to us, they are breaking that fundamental reliance that we have on them. And then that begins to create all sorts of problems like trust and good judgment and accuracy in addressing the problems of the day. So truth is really at the heart of so many of our relationships. Now, why is that? And that kind of gets to Gwen's point. Well, first, God is the source of all truth.
Hello?
Can you not hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
yeah,
hearing
I
you
can
very
hear.
well.
Yeah, I can hear.
Yeah,
I
I
can
can
hear
hear you.
you. I don't know who's saying
Somebody
hello, but we
said
can hear you.
hello as if they can't hear me. Okay.
Yeah, you froze. The screen froze.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. So, it starts with the principle that God is the source of all truth. And that is ultimate truth, right? I mean, that is one idea of the truth, that there is an ultimate reality that God and God alone knows and is the source of and is. God is the truth. Jesus Christ is the truth. So that is kind of the idea of truth as the ultimate reality. Okay. And then building on that or flowing from that comes other ideas of truth, like being accurate, telling right factual matters, being honest, being trustworthy. All of those things flow from the idea that there is an ultimate truth, and God is the source of that. What happens for some people who deny that there is an ultimate truth? What happens? What do you end up with if you don't believe there is an ultimate truth?
Then the person, I think, is not morally sound.
Right.
They're not bound to it. They don't recognize that the truth is what is. Like you said, it's the reality. So it is what is. And once you come to know the truth, which I don't remember when I did, but I feel that I know now for sure. But once you come to know the truth, you're morally bound to it. So once I realized, and I can't remember this either, but once I realized that Jesus is who he says he is, um, I have to direct my whole life in accordance with that. So that's the truth for me.
I think one becomes disillusioned
Yes.
if there is no truth in what they believe in or what is said to them. And Loretta, I do believe that when we come to an age of consciousness, that we somehow know the truth at a very young age. They know when another child is lying to them, at a very young age, it's a lie. But when it's to the point when it's not a lie, you become, it's a lie, but you don't know that. I'm just so confused with all these people who believe a lie when it can be proven that it's a lie.
Right.
I don't seem to understand the sanity of
Right.
those people. And maybe they're disillusioned or maybe they're insane, but I'm just confused. And it
I think
leaves
that
you, and there it is, Father Rich. It leaves me with a sense of confusion. Is why is the truth not as important to these other people as it is to me?
I wanted to
Because
add
so
this
many of
earlier.
One
us,
of the reasons that is the case is because what they call, some people call it alternate reality.
Alternate facts, they call
Yes, it's alternate reality to fit their reality so they can hold on to power.
relativism.
Yes, it has to fit. It has to
Yes.
fit their life in order for them to live the life that they so desperately desire.
Right. So
but
they flip flop depending on what
Yes,
the situation is.
Right.
yes.
that's
It doesn't matter.
wrong.
It doesn't matter what our truth is. It's their truth to fit what they need it to
Yes.
fit.
Michael wanted to say something.
Well, I wanted to add this earlier, and it's getting a little ahead. But I thought this sentence was very crucial. But it says in 2469, it says, men could not live with one another if there were not mutual confidence that they were being truthful to one another.
I believe that.
That's true.
I believe because we're not not half, I don't know what percentage, but many of us are not living together now.
You know, I have to say this because it's a you have to love and trust one another. You know what I mean? I mean, Joe's out right now with his women folks, his family, taking them to the casino. I have to trust that he's going out there and doing what he said he's going to do and come back here. This is the foundation of our life together. It's me trusting him to go out and do what he says he's going to do. Him trusting me to say that I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Because without that trust, we look at each other with blind faith. We look at each other with blind faith and says, I don't trust you. I cannot trust nothing you say or do. And I couldn't live like that. I just couldn't live with a person that I just could not trust that they said they're going to do what they're going to do. I just couldn't trust that person.
Mm-hmm.
What?
You have no peace. You have no peace if you
That's
No,
right.
your livelihood can depend on it. You know,
right.
what if you think you had a spouse who was paying all the bills every month, and the next thing you know, somebody's coming to set you out on the street? I mean, you have to be able to trust people and believe what they say.
Okay,
They
so
say
let's kind of get a little bit at again what this idea of truth is and why it's so important. I mean, you had lots of different ideas flowing there that are really all important. So if you don't believe that there is an ultimate truth, something that is steady, fixed, some idea of reality, then what you get is, as Gretchen said, you get relativism.
Right.
Okay. And relativism, it comes and goes. It's this, it's that. I mean, anything can change at any moment. And what happens in a world of relativism, as we're starting to at least see tastes of it, is then relationships are built on power.
yes.
Whoever has the power to structure relationships is the one who will do so, regardless of what truth is. And that is what you're seeing the making of, and and we don't have to apologize in what Donald Trump and his cohorts do. The whole idea of alternative facts. They're creating a separate reality, a reality that is separate from the truth, and as a result, what happens is you do according to the power that they make you do, or that you choose to follow. Now, so that's the kind of the ultimate idea of truth, is some kind of fixed idea of reality that everybody kind of agrees on, or at least tries to discover and agree on, so then everything else can be built around that. Now, we as Christians say, as was it Loretta who said that, we believe that Jesus Christ is our truth. Okay, that isn't necessarily the case with everyone, all right? But most religions are built on an idea that there is a certain fixed reality. And we are trying to discover what that reality is so that we can organize ourselves, our lives, our society, all of that around that fixed reality. So if you don't believe there is truth, then all that you're left with is relativism. And once you believe that relativism is the reality, then all you are is subject to the power of others. And so truth or reality will become that which the person who has power says it is.
I want to add a little story here. I'm not want to take up much time. However, watching the news, I'm a news junkie, so I watch it all the time. It was on one of the reputable stations, either CNN or MSNBC, something like that. They were interviewing a gentleman, a young adult, he's probably in his 40s, who was the son of a very well-known pastor of a mega church. And he left home to pursue his career, and he became a journalist. And in a lot of his presentations and writings, he was leaning kind of left. When his father passed away, and he went back to his home church where his father was being buried and funeralized, many of the congregants would not shake his hand or offer condolences or anything like that. And so he got a chance to speak to somebody, and they were saying it was because of what you have been writing. Okay, so then he did get a chance to talk to somebody intimately, and he said, "But this isn't what Jesus is about. We're all Christians, and we're losing our faith here." And the gentleman told him, a longtime childhood friend, he said, "We're putting Jesus on the back burner until we can get what we want in politics." So talking about relativism. Now, I saw this report twice on this TV station. So that shows to me that even the evangelicals or people that are supposed to be under the Christian umbrella can also adopt relativism for their own power.
And they have.
Yep.
And don't limit it to evangelicals, though. The Catholic Church does it. Okay, when the Catholic Church supports Donald Trump because of abortion, and yet turns its back on all of the other things that he does, that's a sellout. I think, one of the images that just makes me cringe is, when you have that Al Smith dinner that
I was going to say,
a fun thing. And now to see the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, Timothy Dolan, cozying up to Donald Trump and just delighted to sit next to him and to laugh at everything and to, whisper little things in each other's ears and that kind of stuff. That's a real concern. And so it's not just evangelicals. And why do they do that? Why does Timothy Dolan do that? What's he looking for?
He's looking for contribution.
He's looking for power.
He's looking for power.
Yes.
He wants to be relative.
Power and influence.
But Father Rich, Trump stood there and used profanity sitting next to him, and this Archbishop smiled about that.
Yep. No, so and that's just to say that let's be careful as to how we don't need to limit who is subject to this. There are a lot of respectable, generally, if you want to say that, institutions and leaders who are now giving way to all of this. I mean, and I would say to me, that's the most frightening thing about what we're seeing is when you see leaders of our government say that January 6th was a peaceful protest.
Right.
When 5 people died, as a result of January 6th. It's one thing, you could dismiss Donald Trump as a crazy if he said But when you have leader after leader after leader repeat
Yeah.
that, that's really scary. Because once we detach ourselves from truth, it all becomes about power. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing. Why are people cozying up to Donald Trump, even though they know the things he says aren't true,
Wrong.
because they want power.
Right.
Even his running mate did not. I mean, his running mate flipped because J.D. Vance was anti-Trump at one time.
Okay,
Well, quite a
so
few
let's
of them were anti-Trump, and today they're all gaslighting us every single day.
Yes,
so
there are plenty of Republicans who totally disagree with him, but they're running right behind him because of the power that he has.
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, he
Let's,
talked about them when they were in the primaries running against him. He talked about them terribly, and now they're on his bandwagon, singing his praises. Mickey
Mhm, he
Haley
bullied them.
talked about
Oh,
how
don't
terrible
mention
so,
Nikki
he would
all
be.
right.
Haley.
So we
Don't
kind of
mention
we
her.
kind of looked at, truth at its foundation, and what the implications of not rooting ourselves in truth is. Let's move a little bit more now to sort of talk about truth in terms of faith and our relationship with it. So so the idea is that as Christians, it's our duty to witness to the gospel and to the truth. All right. So, first, what does it mean to witness to the gospel or to the truth? What does that mean?
I was going to say it means you're bearing witness to the love of God, no matter
Now,
what.
remember, you're not allowed to define a word by using the word.
It
So,
means you
By
tell it
how we
or
live
you
it.
show it.
what does it
That's
mean to be a
Yes,
witness to the
you're
gospel or to
seeing.
the
It's,
It,
Gretchen said, "Word, you're showing. You're showing. You're being You're showing people.
Okay, and how are you
well,
showing?
it's martyrdom, isn't it?
No, you're
No,
By the
Oh,
way
it's
you
showing.
the
we're,
live
we'll
word.
get to
out that.
martyrdom. I mean, martyrdom, as the term is developed, has become a certain type of witness. But generally, what does it mean to witness to the truth? What to witness to the gospel?
to
You
live
tell
the
Be an
truth.
You show
example
it
to
and you
show
You
that.
tell
show an
it.
example of
All right,
how
wait,
you
wait, wait, wait.
live.
How you
Whoa,
live
whoa,
your
whoa.
life.
One at a
Yeah.
time. You're all
We want
Kathleen.
everybody talking at once. Yes.
Being
You
an
show an
I
example.
saw
example of
Kathleen.
how you
Kathleen
Question,
live.
wanted to say something. Kathleen,
guys talking. Can you ask the question again, please?
um, again, what does it mean to witness to the truth, to the gospel? It means, well, we have to show what the truth is, but what does that mean? So, Kathleen, were you going to say something?
No, I was just saying, you live by example.
Okay.
Don't
So, witnessing has to do with sort of how we live, right?
Yeah.
Um, and how we live tends to be in two things, right? We witness by what we say, and we witness by what we do.
Mhm.
Okay, so the idea is that as Christians we are called to speak the truth and to live or to do the truth. Okay, so both of those things. It's not just a question of me saying what is true. I have to live it out. Um, so, in our context, as believers in Jesus Christ as the way, the truth, and the life, our lives have to be oriented about what the Gospels say. And when I say the Gospels, I mean in a broader sense, not just the four, not just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but the good news as we have come to know it. Okay, so we're all called to do that. The idea of martyrdom So that's now we're at 2473. A martyr is in the word martyr in Greek simply means witness. Okay. So you will see that word in the New Testament, and it really isn't specifically related, to death or sacrifice or anything like that. It is simply the idea of witnessing. So a person in the New Testament, when you see the word martyr, it just might be referring to someone as a witness. In the Christian tradition, it didn't take long for that idea of witness to be connected to the idea of being willing to bear witness even unto death. Okay. And what was going on? What was going on in the early church that that's how we began to attach the word martyr to one who bears witness even unto death?
The persecution of Christians.
Yeah, the persecutions of the followers of Jesus. We know it happened almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Who do we know as the first martyr?
Wasn't that Stephen?
Stephen.
Yes.
Steve.
Stephen in the Acts of the Apostles is, as far as we know and we can tell from Christian writings, Stephen is known as the first martyr, the one who witnessed to his faith even unto death.
Yeah, he got stoned to death.
Yep, yep. So so that was, he was being stoned. Who was stoning him then at that time? Who killed?
The Jews, his own people.
His own people, right? Who were angry about what he was saying and its implications for the Jewish religion. So he was a martyr and bore witness and died at his own people. What is the other major source of martyrdom in the early Christian church?
The arena, when they put the Christians in the lion's den. I
So
mean,
who was doing that?
the Romans.
Roman.
Okay, so in time, the the greatest threat to Christians came from Rome, not so much the Jews. And in Rome, Rome allowed you to practice those religions that it approved of. So, unlike the Greeks, when the Greeks conquered, they imposed their religion on all of the people that they conquered. So, if you remember from the book of Maccabees, when the Greeks conquered the Mediterranean and conquered Jerusalem, what happened? The emperor put a statue of himself in the temple. Okay, do you remember that story?
Yes, I do. I do. I remember.
Got to know your history here, folks.
Yeah, I remember.
This is occurring in about the 2nd century, I think, before Christ. Antiochus Epiphanes orders that a statue, an image of himself, be placed in the temple because he was now to be the god to be worshipped.
Right.
And what happened? How'd that go over?
It didn't go over too well. I'm trying to remember what happened to that statue. I think did people take it down?
The temple was destroyed, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, not at this time. The temple
Okay.
was later destroyed by the Romans. We're 200 years before Christ, and the Greeks come in and they take over and they impose on everyone their religion. And that didn't go over very well. And the Maccabees, were the ones who fomented a revolt and threw the Greeks out. All right. And they then rededicated the temple, and that rededication of the temple is known as Hanukkah. Okay, that is the celebration of Hanukkah.
I didn't remember that part of the story.
The Jews, the Maccabees, threw the Greeks out of the temple and rededicated the temple to God. Okay. Well, the Romans didn't do it that way. The Romans allowed you to practice your own religion as long as it wasn't a threat to their authority. And therefore, they wanted to approve all of the religions that could be practiced. And if you were practicing an unapproved religion, then you could be put to death. So, what happened to the Christians?
And it wasn't approved. They didn't have an approved religion. So they, the reason they have approved religion because the Jews didn't want it approved. They wanted it approved.
Early fights that's in the Acts of the Apostles, quite frankly, is whether the followers of Jesus, the followers of Christ, who are called Christians, whether they are Jews, right? Whether they're just a sect of Judaism or whether they're a separate religion altogether. And you see that being played out all the time in the Acts of the Apostles, and the Roman authorities say, "Hey, we're not getting involved in this." And the reason was if Christians were a separate religion, then they were unapproved of, and then they could be persecuted. And eventually, that's what happens. They're determined to be a separate religion from Judaism and not approved, and therefore they were persecuted by the Romans.
And their brother Jews let it happen because they wanted to wipe this out themselves. The brother Jews.
Yeah, there is some level of that going on. I wouldn't go too general so that we don't adopt the idea that all Jews wanted the Christians stand.
No, it wasn't all of them, but a lot of their brother Jews. I don't think this would have happened as much as their brother Jews would not have been on their side. Well, sort of like today. I want to be digression for a moment. I want to throw a story in because you said something that triggered something in my head. Do you remember the Kent College shootings they had back in the 70s when the students the National Guard was called in and the protesters was on the Kent.
In Ohio.
4 dead in Ohio.
4 dead in Ohio.
So that was on the View yesterday. They talked about it, and it scared Joy because she thought about Trump talking about he would bring in the National Guard to clean out, to get the undocumented people out or to stop some of the stuff that was going on here. And she said there was like our people killing our people, citizens killing other citizens. And it reminded me of what we just said about what happened to Stephen. His own people killed him, and it was like bringing our own people in to kill us because somebody in power wanted it done.
Well, anyway, so we go back to this religious idea that you are to be faithful and witness to your faith, even if it means your own death. And that was an issue that rose very quickly among the followers of Jesus. Do you think you could have done that? Do you think we still believe that today?
Can I want to share a very quick story.
Some people do.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just a very quick story. and it's somewhat related to this question, but it's more related to what we were previously talking about. But you know, we take our so-called religious freedom for granted in this country. We expect it. We're not always able to live it. We're 24 years into this 21st century. And I had a student. This is one of my students that I had in Sunday school. And I'm not talking recent. It's been a few years. And I'm not going to name the student. But this student in their country suffered not persecution, death persecution, but was spat on and hit and called names because of their faith, because of being a Christian. And we take it for granted and think, oh, this doesn't happen today. But we have to remember that it does still happen today. Not to the point that it did in the past, that in 2,000 years ago. But religious persecution still goes on.
Oh, and it does go to death. I mean, in Africa, the certain sects of Muslims are killing Christians. So I mean, in Nigeria, so it is a reality today. People are still losing their lives because of their faith. And so there is a level, one of the ironies, I think, is when Christians in the United States experience inconveniences, or they lose politically, they'll say they're being persecuted in this country, and you want to say, you have no idea what persecution is. You're all right, you're facing difficulties, because of your faith. But please, when we lose an election and they enshrine abortion into the Constitution, we're not being persecuted. Okay, we may be losing a political battle, but we're not being persecuted. I think we have to be really careful about that. And that is what martyrdom is. It's about willingness to be killed for your faith. That is a pretty high standard. And I don't know how many of us, especially in this country, as Gwen was saying, that, we take everything so for granted. How many of us, if, somebody were threatened that you either do this or you die, someone would say, look, just internally say to God, I still believe you, but save your life. Don't die because of this. I think a lot of Christians today, especially in this country, would say, don't die. Just do what you need to do to stay alive, and just internally say, I believe.
I think too that if you're pushed to a degree of oh boy, I think about that sometimes, and it's like, how much of it can you take when you stand on your faith or your principle? Let's say faith, and it's like the persecutions is closing in, right? And you just get to a point. I don't know. For some reason, I got Civil War in my head. But when you have no other recourse but to fight, and in that fighting, death could be a result of that.
Okay, I mean,
if that thing that you strongly believe in, and you're going to stand on that principle, when all else is against that, because the question I had earlier is that what was the purpose of persecution?
Okay, well, I would say in terms so that, just to be clear about how the church understands the idea of martyrdom, is your suffering and your death must be as a result of your faith, okay? Um, and and so you, in essence, you must suffer and die because you're a Christian. Um, so if the difficulty with the Civil War analogy is, even if you say, well, I believe slavery is wrong and I'm willing to die for that, that wouldn't necessarily make you a martyr unless you were to say, my Christian faith compels me to oppose slavery. And as a Christian, I will, I will hold on to that to the death. That would then be more of a martyrdom. Okay, so martyrdom in the church's point of view is a witness to your faith, and it has to be a public witness to your faith. In other words, it's not internal, it's external. And you have to suffer and die because of that external witness. It's a high standard. And again, as Gwen said, we don't really know that in this country yet. I mean, whether that's the closest we might get to people dying because of the faith is the terrorism you see being, enacted against Jews and even Muslims in this country. But there's not too much risk of death in this country so far, by your witnessing to faith. And as a result, that kind of makes us a little wishy-washy on faith. The Christians in the world who are kind of the most, I don't want to say rigid, but really tough, traditional, holding on, tend to be the ones who are persecuted, because they've got to hold on to a truth, or else they won't have anything. So when Pope John Paul II was kind of cracking down and trying to bring together a sense of, truthfulness in what Catholics believe, you can't forget he was coming from a communist country where Christians and Catholics were persecuted. So he was coming out of an experience that said, we've got to hold together or hang together, or certainly we'll hang separately, right? So martyrdom is, I don't know that we really know too much about that in this country. But so martyrdom is a much higher standard than my life is inconvenienced, or I have to put up with some insults because of what I believe. It's a
Question.
much
But when we look at people like Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King's stand on civil rights was his faith. It was a very Christian thing with him, and people like him, because during there were a lot of pastors that were involved in the civil rights movement, and he gave his life for his. Well, he didn't willingly, but you know what I mean. He died because of what he believed in. It's so he, I mean, I know he's not a quote unquote martyr, but it does fit into that definition.
It's similar to that. I mean, I think they're again from, all right, so put it this way. So in our church, of course, martyrdom makes you a candidate for sainthood. So if you're declared a saint because you're a martyr, that's sort of what the inquiry is going to be about. Were you killed because of your faith? And not necessarily were you killed because of your political stance on issues and that type of thing. And a person like Martin Luther King, that's an interesting conversation, right? Because you can't say that he was separating his faith from his political views. And so it is possible to say he was a martyr because of his Christian faith.
It would be an interesting conversation, yes.
Yeah, so those are
all them saying
our ways. let's move a little bit more into some other ideas about truth and truth telling. So then what the conversation in the Catechism moves away from the truth of sort of religious truth, faith, into sort of what we might call public truth, truth in the public realm, in our ordinary secular everyday lives. Okay, and it lists a whole bunch of different ways that we could be untruthful in our public secular lives. And when I say public, I don't mean you have to be a public official. It's just how you behave, you know, once you leave your home and now are in the public realm. So what does somebody want to read the highlighted?
I'll read it if you want. 2476. When it is made publicly, a statement contrary to the truth takes on a particular gravity. In court, it becomes false witness. When it is under oath, it is perjury. Respect for the reputation of persons forbids every attitude and word likely to cause them unjust injury. He becomes guilty of rash judgment, who even tacitly assumes as true, without sufficient foundation, the moral fault of a neighbor. Of detraction, who without objectivity, valid reason, discloses another's fault and failings to persons who did not know them. Of calumny, who I had to change something. Of calumny, who by remarks contrary to the truth harms the reputation of others and gives occasion for false judgments concerning them.
All right. Why do you think I highlighted this part?
Wow, it covers our interaction
Well, it reminds us when we sit on
with
the jury.
everyone in our ordinary lives. Also, say it again, Dee.
When we in court.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that can be cause for a person's life or freedom being taken. I mean, you know, the consequences are severe.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, I put this in because, you know, this is moving now to the sort of, as you just said, as to the ordinariness of truth telling.
Yeah.
You know, so we're
Yep.
not talking now sort of the martyrdom and witness of our faith unto our death. We're not talking about political campaigns and the search for political power. Here we are about just speaking the truth in our ordinary lives. And anybody feel that at some point they might have violated some of these things?
Well, false,
Which ones?
I mean, false witness, because false witness can be corrected. I don't want to get into a story, but you can be in a situation where you can be violated in some way. Somebody could rob you or whatever. And the police, when you get to court and you ask for a description of this person, the person might not have looked the same to you under duress.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone could come along and describe the person differently. And it's not that I would, I didn't commit perjury because I didn't deliberately lie about what the person looked like at the time. It's just that's the way the person looked to me. So I could just, you know, on second thought, maybe that's the way the other person described that person is the way it really was.
Well, that's a good point. That the first thing about false witness and perjury, it does eliminate. It doesn't add to it, which is essential. Is that it's done deliberately, and knowingly.
Right.
And so what you're saying, Loretta, what you might give witness that he's the one, but you could be mistaken about that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And because of what you say, you know, under certain circumstances, you may see certain things in a way, and that wouldn't really qualify for false witness or perjury, because as you say, you're not doing it deliberately. You honestly think he was the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
You're
know, idle gossip.
Wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, because
Yeah.
you know we gossip so much, but and in the process, can that be considered bearing false witness because through idle gossip?
Okay, well, that's more again when you get into 2477. Let's kind of look at this because that's
Okay.
exactly where we are, Gwen, and why I put it in here. Okay, so the respect for another person's reputation,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is critical. And we don't always look at it that way, but you know, our reputations are critical to who we are and how we live in the world and how people relate to us and everything like that. And so just as we're called to respect life, this person's life, we have to respect the idea of reputation. And so we have to be very, very careful before we engage in practices that, you know, harms a person's reputation. And how do we harm one's reputation? Well, you have the idea of rash judgment. Well, what is that? That means somebody says something about somebody, a nasty thing about somebody, and just because you don't like him, you assume that that's true, and you don't even do any inquiry, and you just now accept that, yep, that person is a bad person because of what somebody told you. We do that all the time. And we do that particularly in the political realm, because when we don't like Donald Trump, we're willing to believe anything anybody says bad about him. Okay? That's a sin. Okay? That is a rash judgment about his character when we accept harmful information as being true without any attempt to know if it is in fact true.
half the time he's making
Well, I don't know
well,
if
he
any.
tell us it. He tells us
Let's go a little bit more, and then we'll come back to it. So that's rash judgment. Rash judgment is accepting someone else's statement about a person's reputation that you're going to accept as true, even though you have no foundation for knowing whether it's true. Okay.
Right.
Detraction. Now, here's one that.
Right. And I thought about that one first because yeah.
Well, let's go through
judgment.
all three, because I think we're going to find that we're probably guilty of all three of this at some point in our lives.
Right.
Detraction. Look at this. Without an objectively valid reason, you have no objective reason, you disclose the fault or failing of another person to someone who did not know that fault and failing. Whoa. So when you tell somebody that so and so, you know, had an affair, say, even though it may be true that he had the affair, if that person had no valid reason to know that information and you're just deciding you're going to tell it, you're the one that committed a sin, because you are disclosing another person's fault or failing to someone who didn't know the fault or failing, and there's no objectively valid reason for you to tell them that, but you do it anyway. Okay, think about it. Have you ever done that? Calumny
yes.
is when you, this is gossip, okay? You say something that is not true in order to harm the reputation of another and allow others to come to false judgments about them. Okay, that is gossip. And that's why it was one when Gwen said that. That's why I want to bring these all three things together. I have a feeling, even though it is this rich, moralistic, theological words, a lot of us, when we first said that, said, "Oh, I don't do that." But I think we have all done that at some point. We either have done rash judgment, we've either just assumed something was true without any reason to know it, or we've told somebody something about another person who had no right to know that, or we've said something that wasn't true about somebody to harm their reputation. All right, go ahead.
This is
But some of
this
these
is why
things,
our mothers tell us, if you don't have something good to say about something, don't say anything at all.
Sure did.
and I was
Absolutely.
going to say also that some of these, maybe all of them, can result in defamation of character.
Mhm. Oh yeah, no, these are exactly all of these. This whole section is yeah, defamation is the legal word we would use. Is
Yeah.
is a result of defaming another person.
Yes.
So
I've
yeah,
had I've had that happen to me.
yeah. I mean, and that's the other thing. Many of us
Yeah.
may have been the victims
Yeah.
of this behavior.
People
Uh,
have, yeah. One
but
person, one person, one person can harm you. It was one person. One person can harm you more than you realize. Once that person starts telling that person, another person, and then that person tells another person, it gets around, and it's very harmful and hurtful for that to
Yeah,
happen.
it is. And you know what? It happens in the workplace because I'm thinking the places that I've worked. And, like you said, when sometimes you try to stay out of that idle gossip type stuff. But, people have lost their jobs over things like this. And even if it was later
You keep jumping in and
proven
out.
not to be true or whatever,
Hello?
the reputation has been cleared. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you
Yes.
go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I think it's my internet. But now I was saying in the workplace that happens because people have lost their jobs over something that may not have been true, even if later cleared, the damage is done.
and yeah, it happened to me in both places. It happened to me at church and it happened to me at work. I mean,
Right.
people just decide without even coming to you that something is true. But that's personal. But I'm going to say something that I started to do this week. And Father Rich just reminded me. I just heard something about someone, and I said, "Well, what happened to the people connected to this someone?" And the person said, "Well, that's someone they haven't even bothered." And I started to tell that to another person. Then I said, "No, I'm not going to do that because that has nothing to do with I don't even know why those people are doing what they're doing." But I started to tell another person about this person and these other people that didn't even need to know. I started doing it, and then I caught myself,
So
and meaning that I probably did it before.
yeah, so before we end today's conversation, because we're getting close, I want to pick up right on that. Uh, the, the, the whole idea of whether someone has a right to know something or not. So, I mean, what I think is mind boggling about the idea of detraction, right, is
Mm-hmm.
if what you disclose may be true, right? um, Disclosing another person's fault, that fault might be true. You are actually saying something that is true. But by saying it to someone who has no reason to know it, you've actually sinned against the commandment of against bearing false witness. So let's kind of go into that because that's what comes into what is a lie. Okay, so a lie is not any speaking of an untruth, right? Or a falsehood, as it says here. A lie is speaking a falsehood with the intention of deceiving, or harming another person. And it also, it doesn't say it right here. Did I find it elsewhere? Yeah. It also is withholding the truth that someone is entitled to know.
Mm.
Okay. So, but it is not a lie if I don't tell you the truth about something you have no right to know. So no one is bound to reveal the truth to someone who does not have the right to know it. Okay. So these are the plays that most of us don't really kind of process when we start talking to each other. That just because it's true doesn't mean you have a right to tell it. Okay, that's on one side. And just because it's untrue doesn't make it a lie.
Father Rich, this
And
is a lot
what's
to
in the
think
middle
about.
is the idea of your intention, your desire to harm someone by either telling them false information when they're entitled to know the truth, or by telling them even true information, but that they're not entitled to know. So the one example it gives is I, as a priest, if Dee comes to me and confesses a sin, and I go tell somebody about that, it may be true that she really did that, but nobody has any right to know that, and I have no right to tell that to anybody.
And Father Rich, I have a question about that.
Okay.
What if that truth harms other people? What if you're not someone comes to you, this is maybe a bit extreme, but I want to make the point. If someone comes to you and tell you they murdered, I don't know, 15 people, and you know the person is a murderer, and you're listening to the news and you're hearing that this person murdered other people, is it a sin or not for you to tell the police that this is a murderer?
Well, it depends whether I heard it in confession or if I heard it in another context.
Let me go through that. This is the thing. I do child and youth protection. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I do the child and youth protection for St. Bernardine's. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we have it that if someone, and I just saw this on TV last night, if someone comes to me and tells me they suspect the child is being abused and I don't say anything, then I've committed a sin, but also I'm in trouble for not reporting that.
Yes.
I have to tell somebody that it happened, whether the person is guilty or not. I have to tell. It is my civil duty, it's my moral duty. I have to tell that the person is a suspect in harming that child. If that person may not be a suspect in hurting that child, but I have to tell that. I think that's where you were trying to come from. I'm not.
Well, yes and no. I mean, because I think the question can be a little bit broader than that. So let's break it down just a little bit. So the confession is a totally different circumstance, okay? Because under church law, I am forbidden to tell anybody what I hear in confession, period, okay? And I have to be willing to go to jail by refusing to say what somebody said to me in confession. Because in the church's view, that sacrament is so critical to our faith lives that I, as the vehicle of God's mercy and forgiveness, and who will hear all sorts of things, I have to be forbidden to tell anybody that, unless that person gives me permission to say it. Okay.
And then
I can't even.
I don't tell.
Wait a minute.
I don't tell anybody.
Wait a minute. Let me finish. I can't even talk to you about something you told me in confession without your permission. Okay. So that is a separate thing. You got to put that off to the side because that has to do with the church's law around the sacrament and my obligation as a priest and as a vehicle of that sacrament. Okay. So I have to be willing to go to jail if, even if I know something that I need to disclose under the law. So under the law, you use Dee's example, if somebody comes and says to me, I molested a child, under the law, I'm required to report that. But under the confession, seal of a confession, I can't report that. And so most states will make an exception for that so that I don't go to jail for not telling that. Okay.
But I go to jail.
Wait a minute. If somebody comes to me and we're just having a counseling session and they disclose that to me, I am obligated to report it, and I have no defense for not reporting it. Because even though there's conversations that may be privileged under the law, that's an exception. So if you tell me you molested a child in confession, I can't tell you anything. If you tell me that while we're having a counseling session, I'm like any other reporter. I have to report that. Okay. And that all goes to the whole idea that you were kind of setting up, that there is an obligation to report certain things if it's going to lead, if your failure to report is going to harm somebody. Okay. That's why, again, one of the things you have to give Donald Trump is he sure does create a lot of opportunity for people to learn things that they never really thought of before. So Donald Trump takes the attitude, anything I say to my lawyer can't be repeated, right? It's privileged. That's absolutely wrong. Because if you start conspiring with your lawyer to break the law, there is no privilege. And it doesn't matter that an attorney-client privilege that is effective in certain areas is not effective if the lawyer is being part of the crime. Okay? And, so the whole thing when he was...
Like Giuliani.
Well, right. All of those conversations about, what he was doing to overthrow the election and his defense was, well, I was talking to my lawyers. That defense did not play out in any of the court cases because it didn't matter. If you and your attorney were conspiring to break the law, that's not privileged. Okay, so there are exceptions to confidences. And they're all around this idea of, does disclosure or does the failure to disclose harm another person? Okay, so that's why I say that all this stuff around truth and falsehood, it only becomes sinful or unlawful when it's done with an intention to harm, or it's done without any respect for the harm that it may create. So our First Amendment doesn't allow you to say anything, which is another thing Donald Trump wants to say, right? Our First Amendment doesn't allow you to lie about something that results in harm of someone because of that lie.
Father Rich, how does that how does that weigh on you as a priest when someone discloses something like that in confession? How does that weigh on you knowing?
Well, depending on what a person does, it has done, if it's still sort of, let's say, an open case, I might encourage them to turn themselves in, right? If it's something that is really critical and they really have to turn themselves in, I may refuse to give them absolution. And then make it clear to them, because under church law, if one priest refuses to give you absolution, you need to report that if you try to go to another priest to get absolution. Technically, you have to tell that priest that you told another one and he refused to give you absolution.
Well, who does that?
So again, I'm just saying that's it. So I might try to work with somebody about that, to, if I feel there needs to be action taken. I would have to say, in terms of some really heinous crimes, the person is already been in jail, been convicted of it or whatever, and now they're admitting to it truthfully in confession. And that's a different, then I don't feel as bad, because the legal system is doing its part, and now I'm doing the spiritual.
But for you as a priest, just like police officers, that they witness a lot of heinous crimes or whatever. How do you internally, as a priest, if you hear things like that, how does that weigh on you? How do you deal with that?
Okay, I'll answer that, and then
if I may ask that question.
I would say that my experience as a priest and hearing what people do, it's in many ways, it's a humbling experience that people would have the faith and the confidence to tell me something very negative about themselves. And so it's very humbling that someone would even tell me those things. And to the point where now, when I'm with someone in confession and they want to tell me something, but I can't tell you because you're going to think differently of me. And I say, I will think differently of you. I will think that your faith is so strong that you're willing to tell me the truth. And that's how I will think differently of you. So that's one thing, the humbling of that people would even have the guts to tell me some of these things about themselves. Second is, it's amazing how many very good people and how many pillars of the church and pillars of the community have done some pretty awful things. And so that, to me, is also a sense of kind of, this may sound, I may not be saying it right, being respectful of the brokenness of human beings. That most of us have done things that we would never want anybody to know. And that's just part of the human experience. And so that comes into when people say, you'll be shocked if I tell you this. After hearing 30 years of confessions, it's pretty hard for you to shock me, because I've heard so many things. And I've not only heard what people have done, but I've heard it from people who you would never think would do those things. Mm-hmm. And they do them. So in that sense, it has helped me not to be a judgmental person, And then third, I would say, as a priest, the ability for people to allow me into their lives around those things, and my ability to assure them of God's forgiveness is extraordinary. And it can completely change a person's life. And in that way, it's extraordinary. And I would think that, I would say most priests who are thoughtful will tell you that of all the sacraments we do, the most powerful sacrament is the sacrament of reconciliation. You can turn someone's life around by hearing their confession and assuring them of God's forgiveness and mercy.
That's powerful, even hearing you say that right now, Father.
It
Amen.
is. It
Amen.
is. It.
Powerful. It really is.
That
And
is so
uh,
profound. I'm
Father,
sitting up here about to share because in our humanity, this is who we are in our humanity. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Father.
So, okay, so and I would just add that's why the seal of the confession is so important. And the whole idea that in none of that would happen if people didn't have that assurance, or a lot of that wouldn't happen. I shouldn't say none of it. And that whole idea that if I'm going to presume to hear some of the darkest things about a person, then I also have to be prepared to go to jail by not revealing it. Otherwise, I can't be an instrument of mercy, and that's the risk I take. Now, fortunately, in this country, it's not a very big risk. That there aren't too many priests who are going to go to jail because they won't reveal what someone said in confession. So it's not a very real threat, but it's critical. I would never advocate for the church to change its law, and say there are exceptions. There can't be exceptions. It has to be absolute, or else you're not going to get the dynamic that you do get as a result of it being absolute. So why don't we end it there?